Commander Vex Thornhill drummed her fingers on the obsidian negotiation table, watching the 7-foot-tall Krazoth diplomat drone on about territorial rights in the Cygnus sector. His skin, a mottled purple-gray, pulsed with frustration each time she interrupted him. "Let me stop you right there, Ambassador Krell," Vex said, pushing her copper-red hair behind her ear. "You're saying humans can't colonize Proxima B because your people might want it someday. That's like me telling you not to eat dinner because I could get hungry tomorrow." The translator implant in her ear buzzed with the sounds of multiple Krazoth voices hissing in their native tongue. The universal translator politely rendered it as, "Your metaphors are as primitive as your species." "Look," Vex stood up, all 5'6" of her, dwarfed by the aliens around the table. "We've been at this for 3 days. My government wants peace. Your government allegedly wants peace. But somehow we keep circling back to how humans should just stay in their corner of the galaxy and be thankful the mighty Krazoth don't squash them like insects." Ambassador Krell's facial tentacles rippled, a sign of either amusement or indigestion. Vex had never quite figured out which. "Perhaps we should conclude today's session with the traditional toast. We can resume when you've had time to consider your position." Vex knew what that meant. The Krazoth thought she needed to call her superiors for new instructions, that she'd reached the limit of her authority. They always underestimated humans. A server placed ornate crystal glasses before each diplomat. The liquid inside shimmered with an iridescent blue glow, the famous Krazoth ceremonial drink called Vroxul. "To understanding between our species," Krell said, raising his glass. Vex lifted hers, catching a whiff of something astringent that hadn't been present in previous toasts. She'd spent 3 years as the human ambassador to 4 different alien species, and if there was one thing she'd learned, it was to trust her nose. She smiled anyway and took a sip. The liquid burned slightly more than usual going down. Well, that settled it. They'd poisoned her. So much for diplomacy. "Delicious as always," she lied, setting down her glass. "I look forward to continuing our talks tomorrow." As she walked back to her quarters, the implant behind her ear vibrated. "Commander," came the artificial voice of Quip, her AI assistant. "I'm detecting elevated toxicity in your bloodstream. Analysis indicates it's a compound similar to Vroxul 9, a Krazoth interrogation drug." Vex kept her face neutral as she passed 2 Krazoth guards. "Lovely. How long do I have?" "Approximately 12 hours before complete neuromuscular shutdown. Though the process will be unpleasant throughout." "Of course it will." Vex changed direction, heading not toward her quarters but toward the maintenance tunnels. "Quip, you know what this means, right? That the peace talks have failed and we should request immediate evacuation." Vex grinned, already feeling the first tingling in her fingertips. "No, it means we have 12 hours to take over this entire fortress. Sometimes I wonder why they programmed me with the capacity for dread." Quip sighed. The first symptom hit Vex as she crawled through the maintenance shaft, a muscle spasm that made her right leg kick out involuntarily, clanging against the metal wall. "Subtle," Quip commented in her ear. "Thanks for the critique," Vex whispered, freezing in place. When no guards came running, she continued her awkward shuffle. "What's the toxin doing to me exactly?" Stage 1 minor muscle spasms and increased sensitivity to light, approximately hours 1 through 4. Stage 2, intermittent hallucinations and bursts of adrenaline, hours 4 through 8. Stage 3, partial paralysis, alternating with periods of hyperstrength as your nervous system misfires, hours 8 through 11. Stage 4, total shutdown. "So I get super strength before I die. That's convenient. I wouldn't call it super strength, more like dangerously unpredictable muscle contractions that could just as easily break your own bones as help you fight." Vex reached a junction in the tunnels, and paused to check the schematics Quip projected onto her retina. "Always looking on the bright side. How'd you get a copy of the fortress layout anyway?" "Lieutenant Draz provided it during your last meeting. I believe his exact words were, 'just in case those idiots try something stupid.'" "Draz," Vex murmured. The junior Krazoth diplomat had always been the most reasonable of the bunch. Can we trust him? He's the only Krazoth who bothered to learn Earth idioms. Anyone who can properly use shooting fish in a barrel in conversation deserves some credit. Vex continued crawling until she reached a ventilation grate overlooking what appeared to be a security control room. 2 Krazoth guards lounged inside, their attention focused on something Vex couldn't see. And then the human said, "That's not an airlock, that's my shuttle." One guard finished, causing both to erupt in raspy laughter. "Comedian of the year," Vex muttered, then winced as another spasm, stronger this time, shot through her arm. "Commander, your heart rate is elevated and pupil dilation indicates stage 1 is progressing rapidly," Quip warned. "Then we'd better speed things up." Vex removed a small device from her pocket, a sonic disruptor disguised as a compact mirror, standard equipment for human diplomats in potentially hostile territory. Because human diplomacy had evolved significantly since the First Contact War, she activated it and tossed it through the grate. A high-pitched whine filled the room, inaudible to humans, but excruciating to Krazoth auditory organs. Both guards clutched their head crests and collapsed. Vex kicked out the grate, and dropped into the room, landing awkwardly as her right leg seized again. "Stupid Toxin," she growled, limping to the control panel. "If it's any consolation, the Krazoth expect you to be in your quarters right now, curled up in agony and begging for an antidote," Quip offered. Their first mistake. Vex placed her palm on the security console, allowing Quip to interface with the system. "Assuming humans beg, access granted," Quip announced after a moment. "Though I should point out this is technically an act of war. They poisoned an ambassador during peace talks. I'm just responding in kind." Vex scrolled through the security feeds until she found one showing the Central Command Center. "There's our target. How many guards between us and them?" "Approximately 27, plus whatever automated defense systems I haven't detected yet." Vex's vision blurred momentarily, the security screen splitting into doubles before resolving again. "And how many hours until stage 2 of this lovely toxin?" "At your current metabolic rate, approximately 2 hours and 17 minutes. "Perfect." Vex downloaded the security patrol schedules to her implant. "That gives us just enough time to get into position. By the time those hallucinations kick in, I want to be right outside their command center." May I point out that hallucinating during a covert infiltration mission is generally considered a disadvantage. Vex grinned, though it came out as more of a grimace as another spasm hit. Not if they don't know what's real either. 2 hours later, Vex crouched in a utility closet outside the officers' mess hall, 3 levels below the command center. Her skin felt like it was crawling with invisible insects, and the walls occasionally seemed to breathe. Stage 2 was definitely kicking in. "Status update," she whispered to Quip. "Security remains unaware of your presence. The 2 unconscious guards were found, but they're blaming it on equipment malfunction. Krazoth are apparently quite susceptible to sonic disruption headaches." "Filed that under useful information for later," Vex said. "Any sign of Ambassador Krell, or our friend Draz?" "Ambassador Krell is in the command center. Lieutenant Draz is." Quip paused. "Actually, he's approaching your position now, alone." The door to the utility closet slid open, and Vex prepared to attack, only to freeze when she saw Lieutenant Draz's lanky frame silhouetted in the doorway. For a Krazoth, he was unusually thin, almost gangly, with facial tentacles that seemed perpetually arranged in what humans might interpret as a concerned expression. "Commander Thornhill," he hissed softly, "I hoped I would find you here." "That's disconcerting," Vex managed, fighting the urge to laugh as Draz's outline seemed to glow purple, then green. "Definitely hallucinating now. They poisoned you. It wasn't a question. The old ones have become desperate. They fear what an alliance with humans would mean for the traditional power structures. So they decided to murder me. That seems like an overreaction to a trade agreement." Draz's tentacles twitched. "You underestimate how frightened they are of your kind. Humans adapt too quickly. Within a generation, you could surpass us." "Flattering, but I'm a bit busy right now." Vex grimaced as a wave of nausea hit her. Unless you've got an antidote hidden in those fancy robes, I need to keep moving. No antidote, but I can help you reach the command center. Draz produced a security badge. This will grant you access to the executive lift system. Vex narrowed her eyes, which only made the hallucinations worse. Draz now appeared to have 3 heads, all looking equally concerned. Why help me? Because I've studied your history. When humans are cornered, they don't surrender. They change the rules. I would rather be on the side that embraces change. He held out the badge. Take it. You have perhaps 4 hours before the 3rd stage begins. As Vex reached for the badge, her hand passed through what she thought was Draz's arm, a hallucination, before connecting with the solid object in his actual hand. This is going to get very confusing very fast, she muttered. Commander, Quip interjected. Your vital signs indicate accelerated progression of the toxin. The hallucinations are affecting your depth perception. You don't say, Vex replied, watching as the walls rippled like water. Oddly enough, within those ripples, she could make out faint outlines that shouldn't have been visible, energy conduits, hidden security sensors, and most interestingly, the shimmer of a cloaked Krazoth guard standing right outside the door. Draz, she whispered, there's a guard right behind you. Impossible. This section is cleared for. Draz began, but Vex was already moving. She lunged past him, her hand striking what looked like empty air. There was a satisfying grunt as her fist connected with something solid, and suddenly the air shimmered to reveal a startled Krazoth security officer, his cloaking device disrupted. Huh, Vex said, watching the guard crumple. The toxin lets me see through your cloaking technology. That's actually pretty useful. Draz stared at her, his 3 heads, which Vex knew rationally was just one, showing identical expressions of shock. That shouldn't be possible. The cloaking field bends light in ways the organic eye cannot. Save the physics lesson, Vex interrupted, stepping over the unconscious guard. My impossible toxin-enhanced vision says we've got about 30 seconds before his friends show up. Executive lift. This way, Draz said, leading her down the corridor. Though I feel compelled to mention this plan of yours borders on suicidal. Technically, I'm already dying, Vex pointed out cheerfully, so it's more of a nothing-to-lose situation. As they hurried through the corridors, Vex realized she could see more and more of the fortress's hidden infrastructure. Energy fields, security beams, even the heat signatures of Krazoth guards through walls, all visible as colorful overlays on her increasingly trippy reality. Quip, she whispered, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Your visual cortex is firing randomly. I can't access your hallucinations, but your pupil dilation and focus patterns suggest you're perceiving on multiple wavelengths simultaneously. The toxin is affecting the optic nerve, Draz explained quietly, as they reached the executive lift. It breaks down the filtering mechanisms. In Krazoth, it causes blindness. In humans, apparently it expands vision. Their poison makes me stronger, Vex laughed, then immediately regretted it as the sound echoed painfully in her own head. Of course it does. Humanity, fuck yeah. The lift doors opened to reveal the antechamber to the command center, and Vex could clearly see the outlines of 4 cloaked guards stationed around the room. I count 4 invisible friends waiting for us, she whispered to Draz. The Krazoth lieutenant stared at her, in something approaching awe. This is why they fear you. Even dying, you adapt. Let's give them something real to fear, Vex said, stepping into the antechamber, with a confidence she definitely didn't feel as the walls continued to breathe around her. General Vrox was having an excellent day. The troublesome human diplomat would be incapacitated by now, likely calling her superiors to beg for extraction. The peace talks would collapse, and the Krazoth Empire would continue its expansion unhindered by human interference. In a few hours, they would magnanimously offer her the antidote in exchange for human withdrawal from 3 disputed systems. So when the command center doors hissed open to reveal Commander Vex Thornhill, who should have been writhing in agony in her quarters, Vrox's facial tentacles went completely rigid with shock. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Vex said cheerfully, strolling in as if she owned the place. Behind her, 4 of his elite guards lay in crumpled heaps, and even more disturbing, Lieutenant Draz stood at her side, looking far too comfortable with the situation. "What is the meaning of this?" Vrox demanded, rising from his command chair. "How are you even standing?" "Funny story," Vex said, casually leaning against a console as a wave of dizziness hit her. To the Krazoth observers, it probably looked nonchalant. In reality, she was using the console to keep herself upright as the room spun around her. "Turns out your fancy truth serum affects humans a little differently than expected." Vrox's upper eye ridge twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it, General." Vex waved dismissively, accidentally swatting at a hallucination of a butterfly that fluttered past her face. "Stage 2 is really kicking in now, and I don't have time for denials." "Quip, lock down the fortress." "With pleasure," her AI responded, and suddenly the command center's lights shifted to emergency red as blast doors slammed shut throughout the facility. "You can't do this," one of the junior officers squeaked, his tentacles flailing in panic. "Those are protected systems." "Actually," Lieutenant Draz interjected, "she already has. Your security protocols were designed to keep enemies out, not enemies who are already inside with executive access." He held up his badge meaningfully. General Vrox's eyes narrowed to slits. "Traitor," he hissed at Draz. "Visionary," Draz corrected. "Unlike you, I've actually studied human history. Do you know what happens when you corner a human? They don't surrender, they get creative." A violent muscle spasm suddenly shot through Vex's left arm, and she accidentally smashed her fist down on the console, cracking its surface. The unexpected display of strength made every Krazoth in the room flinch back. "Whoops," Vex said, examining her hand with genuine surprise. "Looks like stage 3 is arriving early." "Quip, update. Neuromuscular misfiring has begun. You'll experience alternating bouts of partial paralysis and hyperstrength as your nervous system deteriorates. You have approximately 4 hours before total shutdown." "Plenty of time." Vex grinned at General Vrox, whose expression had shifted from outrage to something approaching concern. "Now, about those peace talks." "You're bluffing," Vrox said, though his confidence was clearly shaken. "Even if you control this room, you're one dying human in a fortress of Krazoth warriors." As if on cue, Vex's right leg gave out completely, and she had to grab the console again to stay upright. "True, but I'm one dying human who just locked every Krazoth warrior into isolated sections of the fortress." She nodded to a security display showing confused groups of soldiers trapped between sealed blast doors. "And I control all life support systems." Vrox's face darkened to a deep purple. "You wouldn't dare." "Normally, no, but I'm literally dying because you poisoned me during peace talks." Vex took an unsteady step forward, and the general instinctively stepped back. "So my diplomatic restraint is, shall we say, compromised." "Commander," Quip interrupted, "a Krazoth battlecruiser is moving into position above the fortress. They're preparing to override the security lockdown." "Perfect timing." Vex pointed to the communications console. "Open a channel to the entire Krazoth fleet. Let's chat with your superiors." "This is madness," Vrox sputtered. "No," Vex corrected, her vision doubling again as she stared him down. "This is what happens when you poison someone too stubborn to die on schedule." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Zorv, Supreme Commander of the Krazoth fleet. His facial tentacles bristled with obvious confusion at the sight of the human diplomat standing in his command center. "What is the meaning of this?" "General Vrox, explain yourself," the Admiral demanded. "Hi there," Vex waved, then had to quickly grab the console again as another leg spasm nearly toppled her. "Commander Vex Thornhill, Human Diplomatic Corps. Your general here poisoned me during peace talks, so I've decided to renegotiate terms from a position of slightly more leverage." She gestured to the fortress schematics now displayed on a side screen with critical systems highlighted in red.
I now control your regional headquarters, including life support, defense systems, and my personal favorite, the self-destruct mechanism. Admiral Zorv's eyes widened. You're lying. The self-destruct requires 3 separate command authorizations. It did. Lieutenant Draz stepped forward. Until your security chief changed the protocols last month to prevent exactly this type of takeover. Ironic, isn't it? In trying to consolidate power, he created a single point of failure. Vex felt a wave of paralysis creeping up her right side, and fought to keep her expression neutral. So here's my ultimatum. Sign the peace treaty, as originally proposed by the human delegation, including recognition of our colonial rights in the disputed systems, or I trigger the self-destruct and we all get to meet our respective makers together. You would die too, Admiral Zorv pointed out. I'm already dying, Vex reminded him cheerfully. Quip, show them my current medical readings. A holographic display of Vex's rapidly deteriorating vital signs appeared before them. Her neural patterns were particularly alarming, with entire sections of her nervous system already showing critical failure. Stage 3 of your toxin is quite unpleasant, Vex continued conversationally, even as she lost feeling in her right hand. But on the bright side, I won't feel a thing when this fortress vaporizes. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Admiral Zorv stared at Vex through the viewscreen, his ancient eyes calculating the probability that she was bluffing. Behind her, she could feel General Vrox seething with a combination of rage and disbelief. Admiral, Vrox finally broke the silence. The human is clearly deranged from the effects of the toxin. We cannot. The toxin you administered, Vex interrupted, her words slightly slurred as numbness crept along her jaw. During supposedly peaceful diplomatic talks. That's an act of war where I come from. A regrettable misunderstanding, Admiral Zorv said smoothly. General Vrox clearly exceeded his authority. We would be happy to provide the antidote immediately. And the peace treaty. Vex pressed, blinking hard as the Admiral's face blurred and shifted before her eyes, sometimes appearing to have 2 heads, sometimes 3. We will need time to review the terms again, Zorv hedged. Perhaps a temporary cessation of hostilities while we... Quip, Vex interrupted. Activate the first stage alert for the self-destruct sequence. Alarm klaxons immediately blared throughout the fortress, and countdown timers appeared on every screen. The Krazoth officers in the command center began to panic, their tentacles writhing in distress. You can't be serious, Vrox exclaimed. Commander, your core temperature is rising dangerously, Quip warned in her ear. Neurological breakdown is accelerating. Vex ignored both of them, focusing all her remaining energy on staying upright and looking as threatening as possible. Admiral Zorv, I don't have time for negotiations. Sign the treaty now, or we all die together. You have 5 minutes to decide. She nodded to Draz, who cut the transmission. The moment the screen went dark, Vex's legs gave out completely. Draz caught her before she hit the floor, helping her into the command chair, Vrox's chair, as the general watched in impotent fury. You're deteriorating faster than expected, Draz said quietly, genuine concern in his voice. The increased physical activity accelerated the toxin spread, Quip confirmed. Commander, at this rate, you have less than 2 hours before total system failure. Vex laughed weakly. Just need to last long enough to push that button if they don't agree. General Vrox, who had been eerily quiet, suddenly stepped forward. You've made your point, Commander. I can provide the antidote now. So you admit you poisoned me? Vex raised an eyebrow, trying to focus on his face through her increasingly unreliable vision. A standard practice in delicate negotiations, Vrox said dismissively. Merely a truth serum to ensure honest dialogue. How were we to know humans would react so dramatically? Truth serum. Vex exchanged a glance with Draz, who looked equally surprised. Vrox at 9, Draz confirmed. It's supposed to inhibit the deception centers of the brain. In Krazoth, it causes mild discomfort but makes lying impossible. We've used it in diplomatic negotiations for centuries. Vex laughed, then winced as the movement sent pain shooting through her chest. So you weren't trying to kill me, just make me incapable of lying during negotiations. That's actually kind of hilarious. Obviously, we miscalculated the human physiological response, Vrock said stiffly. But the effect is not meant to be lethal. The antidote will reverse all symptoms. Convenient that you mentioned this only after I've taken control of your fortress, Vex noted dryly. The communication screen flickered back to life before Vrox could respond. Admiral Zorv's face appeared, looking considerably less composed than before. We have reviewed your demands, Commander Thornhill, the Admiral said formally. The Krasov High Command is prepared to sign the peace treaty, as originally proposed, with full recognition of human colonial rights in the disputed territories. Vex struggled to keep her expression neutral as another wave of muscle spasms hit her. Smart decision, Admiral. Lieutenant Draz will verify the treaty text before transmission. Once it's signed by both parties, I'll deactivate the self-destruct and surrender control of the fortress. And you will accept medical treatment, Zorv added, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Wouldn't miss it. Vex managed through gritted teeth as Draz helped her sit upright again. The next hour passed in a blur as Draz handled the treaty verification, occasionally consulting with Vex when she was lucid enough to follow the conversation. By the time the final signatures were applied, human leadership had been remarkably quick to agree once they understood the situation. Vex could barely keep her eyes open. Treaty complete, Commander, Quip announced. All signatures verified and authenticated. Deactivate, self-destruct. Vex mumbled, fighting to stay conscious. Release command. Lockdown. Done and done, Quip confirmed. Medical team is en route to your location. As the fortress systems returned to normal operation, General Vrox approached Vex's chair, a small vial of iridescent liquid in his hand. The antidote, he said simply, offering it to her. I suggest you take it quickly. Vex eyed the vial suspiciously. How do I know this isn't just another poison? Because Vrox said with what might have been respect in his voice, killing you now would start a war. We clearly cannot win. 3 weeks later, Commander Vex Thornhill stood at the observation window of the newly established Joint Human-Krasov Space Command, watching ships from both species dock and depart in orderly fashion. The antidote had worked quickly, reversing the neurological damage within hours, though the Krasov doctors had seemed genuinely shocked at how far the toxin had progressed before treatment. Still enjoying the view? Lieutenant Draz asked, joining her at the window. Following the treaty signing, he had been appointed as the official Krasov liaison to human space forces, a promotion that had raised more than a few tentacles among the old guard. Never gets old, Vex replied. A week ago these ships would have been shooting at each other. Now they're coordinating patrol routes. Remarkable what one can accomplish with a little poison and lot of audacity, Draz observed dryly. Speaking of which, Vex turned to face him. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. That toxin, the truth serum, why did it affect me so differently? Draz's facial tentacles arranged themselves in what Vex had come to recognize as his equivalent of a smile. Our xenobiologists have developed a theory. The compound targets neurotransmitter regulation in the brain. In Krasov, this suppresses our ability to form deceptive thoughts. In humans, it appears to bypass your brain's sensory filters instead. So I wasn't hallucinating. I was actually seeing things that were really there, just normally invisible to humans. Precisely. The cloaking technology, energy fields, radiation signatures, all exist on wavelengths the human brain typically filters out. The toxin removed those filters, and the paralysis, the muscle spasms, side effects of your nervous system being overwhelmed by the additional sensory input, Draz explained. Quite fascinating really. Our scientists are already exploring potential medical applications with proper safeguards, of course. Vex laughed. So let me get this straight. You poisoned me to make me tell the truth, but instead gave me temporary superpowers, which I used to take over your fortress and force you into a peace treaty that you didn't want. That is technically accurate, Draz admitted. Humanity, fuck yeah, Vex said with a satisfied nod. Her earpiece vibrated gently. Commander, Quip's voice chimed in her ear. Admiral Zorv has arrived for the joint command ceremony. Your presence is requested in the main hall. Duty calls, Vex sighed. Ready to make history, Lieutenant. After witnessing you conquer a fortress while dying of truth serum poisoning, I believe I'm prepared for anything, Commander. As they walked toward the ceremony hall, Vex smiled to herself. Quip, be honest. Did you actually believe my take over the fortress while poisoned plan would work? Not for a single nanosecond, the AI replied promptly. I calculated a 97% chance of your immediate death, followed by a retaliatory Krasov attack on human colonies. And yet you helped me anyway. I am programmed to assist you, not to question your suicidal tendencies, Quip replied in its most prime voice. Though I have taken the liberty of adding prone to reckless behavior when poisoned to your official medical file. Probably wise, Vex conceded as they reached the doors to the ceremony hall. Through the glass she could see Admiral Zorv and General Vrox waiting with human officials. Vrox still looked like he'd swallowed something sour every time he saw her. One last thing, Commander, Draz said quietly. The treaty grants you full diplomatic immunity within Krasov territory. Is that your subtle way of telling me to behave myself at the ceremony? Quite the opposite. Draz's tentacles twitched with amusement. It's my way of saying that if anyone offers you a ceremonial drink, you're now legally protected if you decide to throw it in their face. Lieutenant Draz, Vex said solemnly as the doors swung open. I believe this is the beginning of a beautiful diplomatic relationship. Indeed, Commander, he agreed. Though perhaps we should stick to water for the toasts. Where's the fun in that? Vex grinned, stepping forward to greet the assembled dignitaries, her head held high. After all, their poison only made me stronger. Behind her, Quip's voice sighed in her ear. Humans, you really are impossible. That's what they're afraid of, Vex whispered back. And why we're going to get along just fine.